answer, we might have solved it by now. Let's bring in political and social impact strategist Kristal Knight and former Texas state lawmaker and founder of the Patriot Academy, Rick Green. Great to have you both. So let's start with this issue in other cities that have worked, Kristal. They say housing first is the answer, but it is maybe a little bit easier than it sounds because, as we've mentioned, there are a lot of other issues involved here.
Well, yeah, I mean, the challenge with, housing unhoused people is this NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. Right here in Washington, D.C., the mayor, Muriel Bowser, she's put at least $500 million to combat homelessness and creating shelters across the city. And you know what happened? Ward members or, members who are of the city council, they decided that they didn't want these shelters in their respective wards. We don't want it in Ward 3, which is one of the more prominent wards in the city. And so if you're wanting to solve, homelessness, help the unhoused, providing money towards mental health, you also have to address the chronic issue of people being on the street. And that means there's going to be a homeless shelter or some type of housing facility in a neighborhood where residents don't want it. And so that's the issue as well. It's not just a political will, it's also people don't want it in their backyard, and that's a challenge.
It's a lot of money, Rick, that we're spending, and it's apparently not working, or at least not well in a couple of cities who've tried to figure this out. What do you think is the answer?
Yeah. Hey, Joe, Kristal, good to see both of you. It's not as tough an issue, I think, as we make it out to be. Just like any other policy, you either have principles that work or principles that don't. And we're smart to look at cities where it's working well and look at cities where it's not working. And the people that are only doing housing first are failing miserably. Look, I looked at my former colleague, Sylvester Turner, a Democrat in Houston, that says you got to do a whole lot more than just housing first. He calls it tough love, and it's worked really well. Houston has done much better than these other big cities across the country because of that tough love. So you got to stop the encampments. You got to actually put people in jail when they commit crimes. You got to stop releasing thousands of people from prison for COVID and other reasons. You got to stop encouraging illegal aliens. There's a lot of policies that are contributing to this, but you've got to get to the human condition, not just the housing condition. Let the ministries, let the nonprofit groups do what they do best. We need more treatment, obviously, and really that's the secret. It's treatment first, not housing first.
Because, Kristal, these are not folks, for the most part, who are having a hard time making their payment. It isn't necessarily a housing issue for them, and they're happy sleeping on the streets because they don't want to go, in many cases, to a shelter because they're worried about their safety or they're worried about getting sick, or they're not allowed to do the drugs that they're addicted to. Again, there are many facets to this.
Well, yeah, I agree that there are many factors, but I disagree with Rick about putting people in jail. Our jails are already over-incarcerated right now, and we've seen a reduction in people being in jail because of COVID. So that's not the answer. I think the answer is, or part of the answer is, finding ways to address what are the chronic issues that people are facing in those communities. One of them, that you just mentioned is drug treatment programs. The other thing is community violence intervention programs. That's something that the president has funded at the federal level, and that states have to be willing to accept that money and give it to the cities that need it the most so that they can, deter this crime wave that's happening across the country.
One of the numbers, though, 1% of the population in LA is homeless, but they're committing 8% of the violent crime. And we're seeing it in Chicago as well. We just have seen examples of it in New York where a homeless person was accused of pushing someone off a subway. These are issues, Rick, that need to be addressed, again, beyond incarceration.
Yeah, there's got to be some common sense here. I mean, we have to say, look, there are violent people that cannot be left out on the streets and certainly should not be encouraged to continue drug use like San Francisco has done. I mean, literally putting on billboards ways to encourage drug use and share with your friends and do drugs with you. It's crazy what the leftists are willing to do. And the jailbreak, the idea that we're just going to not put people in jail when they commit crimes and hope that things will be better if we don't do that, that's a huge contributor to this and cannot be ignored. Let's go back to enforcing the laws. That's part of what Sylvester Turner has done in Houston. And I'm talking about a guy that I used to debate a lot in the legislature, and we usually disagreed on everything. I agree with his approach on homelessness, and he's had good success. I hope other cities will follow his model.
Kristal Knight, Rick Green, thanks again for the time. We appreciate it. We're going to turn now to another